Hi everybody, and welcome to my fly tying tutorial. The pattern that I'm going to be tying for you today is called a sulfur parachute emerger. Before showing you the actual steps to tying it, I'm going to talk briefly about what makes this an emerger pattern. So the sulphur is an insect that comes out of the mayfly family. For mayflies, they first start off as nymphs. They rise through the water column. When they get to the top of the water column, the nymphal, the part of the head, the actual top part, the wing case splits open, and the dun or the adult crawls out of the nymphal shuck. What remains, what trails from the adult, is this thing that we're going to be calling a trailing shuck, where it's basically the nymphal case. Thus, if you look at my parachute, it's a really standard parachute pattern with the exception of this camel-colored zelon that's coming off the tail. That zelon is going to represent that nymphal shuck, or the trailing shuck, behind the adult mayfly. The one thing that you may want to notice, just a little nuance about this, is that whenever I tie in this shuck, I like to have that shuck angled down toward the water. With typical adult mayflies, their tails are always going straight out or angled up just a hair. But in this case, because this is the emerger pattern, I'm going to have that angled towards the water. Everything else will remain relatively consistent with an average parachute. At times I do oversize my hackle just a little bit depending on the water type that I am fishing, but for the pattern that you see right now, it's going to be a little oversized. However, the hackle on the pattern that I will be tying for you right now is going to be typically the standard size hackle. All right, now I start off with a size 16 dry fly hook. I really like this hook. It's just got a great look to it. This is an Allen fly fishing hook. Let me get this centered in this vise for you guys. This is their D102BL. Here's a look at the package. Nice little dry fly hook, just has a great angle to it. And I'm going to be using 8/0 light Cahill thread. Here's a look at the thread. I'm just going to put a few wraps right by the head. Break this off. And then I'm going to grab some pink antron to use for my parachute post. I really like this color because it just stands out when it's on the water, especially if you're fishing this in a low light condition. I'm going to take this material and cut off approximately 2 inches of it. So I'm going to have about this much of it. After I have that 2 inches, I'm going to just hold it up by the side, and you'll see a few scragglies. I'm going to take some of those scragglies and just set them to the side, and I'll use those on a future pattern. I don't like to use a full amount of this antron because it just is a lot, especially for a size 16. All right, next I'm going to make a couple wraps, build up my head just a hair, pull my thread back towards me, and place this antron underneath the thread. As you can see, I'm kind of holding it there with my finger. And I'm just going to grab it by the tips. I'm actually going to do that with my left hand. I'm going to pull it down the thread and make a wrap around. What's nice about placing the antron on top of the hook is that if you didn't like where you placed it, you can kind of move it around. The other nice thing is that it doesn't build up the head or the thorax of your fly. All right, once I have that there, I'm going to just place a few locking wraps. Then I'm going to hold onto the tips with my right hand. Then with my left hand, I'm going to start to helicopter wraps above the hook shank and around that parachute post. Sorry if I block the camera view at all. I try my darndest not to. So I like to place anywhere around a dozen or so, going up, then a few more coming back down. Every now and then I will wrap it around the hook shank just to make sure that it's a little more solid. Okay, and that's about all that I'm going to need. Now if you want, you can trim this post right now. I'm not going to trim it. I'm just going to leave it there. Wrap back approximately halfway between the post and the bend. And now I'm going to tie in some of my trailing shuck. Now there's a couple colors I like to use. If you think of the trailing shuck as kind of like a pheasant tail, so think of that brown color. Here's a camel, and here's a brown. I like to use some type of variation of these two, or somewhere in between this light and this dark color. I'm going to use the light one today because it kind of looks a little bit more like that sulfur color as well, so it could be mistaken for the body if you really believe that. So I'm just going to pull some fibers out. I'll show you approximately how many I'm going to pull out. I'm just going to grab a little bit of this scruffiness and pull some fibers out so that you'll have a nice amount coming off that tail. And that's going to be about a perfect amount. I'm only going to need a little bit of this, so I'm just going to get a little closer to there, make sure that's still enough. If it's not, you can always double it up. So I trim that amount off. I'm just going to lock these in. I'm going to tie straight back. And as before, though you typically would stop a mayfly around that point, I'm just going to make a couple extra wraps just to make sure that those are just shooting down a little bit. I might grab the butt ends of those antron fibers. I'm going to trip them. I'm going to cut them not right where I tied them in. I'm actually going to cut just a millimeter or so closer so that whenever I bring my dubbing up, I'm going to lock those tight against that, that parachute post. All right, one straggly in there. Okay, from this point, now we just basically have a standard parachute. So I might just grab some dubbing. You're going to want to grab a dubbing color that will match the natural on your stream. I put a little thicker near the middle. I'm just going to put touches closer because I do want to taper the body of my sulphur. Okay, I'll put just a little bit more on there. Before I start tying, I always just like to angle that parachute post up a little bit, just so it doesn't get in my way. Okay, you might notice I will be doubling it over a little bit because I want to make sure I have that taper going. All right, when I get to this point, you can see I have my body built up. I'm going to stop the thread directly underneath the parachute post and just pull my dubbing down a little bit. All right, next time I go to my hackle, I'm going to be using a great Clearwater hackle saddle today. Let me zoom out so you can take a peek at this. Here's a look at the hackle, just an awesome light ginger color. I've already pulled a piece off, but I prefer to get the pieces of hackle from the sides. So if you look at this nice barring on these sides, there are little smaller hackles on the sides of the saddles too. So whenever you use this Clearwater hackle, grab that from the side. I pulled out one already, and I'll show you exactly how I'm going to strip everything off of this feather. So I have the feather right here. If you look near the butt end of the feather, for the most part these feathers are really nice because they maintain a constant taper. But then at one point the color starts to change, and it's at that point I normally go about an inch up from that and I pull the fibers down just like this. I'll zoom out just a little bit so you have an idea of what's going on. So I pull those fibers down there. I'm just going to get them out of the way, and then I'm going to trim at that spot with my scissors. Okay, so my hackle now looks like this, and it's ready to be tied in. Let me zoom back in so you can see that part. Okay, as I'm going to tie in it really is up to you if you want to tie them in with this barring facing up or down. And that, again, that is personal preference. There's some tyers that say you really have to have them one way or another. I don't believe that. If you want that barring really showing, you'll want to tie it with that barring side down. I prefer that little bit of the whiter side going down just because I believe that will imitate a little bit more of the natural insect. So I might put this extra, that little section of the hackle that's going down against the post. I'm going to place about 2 wraps behind it, 1 wrap in front of it, and now you'll see my dubbing's going to start catching up. So I can put 1 wrap behind, a couple wraps in front, and I've just built up a nice thorax. All right, now I can just bring my thread, advance it just a little bit further. If you have to go back over that, it really is not going to show. So it really doesn't matter to that point. Next, I do want to wrap my hackle in. I might make approximately 4 or 5 turns of hackle. There's 2, 3. I think that's going to be good right there. With my last turn, I like to bring it under those fibers as much as possible. Then I pull it straight back to me. As I pull it straight back with my left hand, I'm going to pick up all those loose fibers and pull them out of the way. With them out of the way, I'm going to take my right hand and then lock in this hackle. I can release. I'm going to pick up the hackle with my left hand, trim it, and now I have a real clean eye. Place a quick half hitch. Now I'm going to finish it off with my whip finish. I need about 3 in here. The head is looking great. The hackle is completely out of the way. I'll make this final trim. The thread is gone. I'm going to pull my parachute post back up, and now it's time to trim my post. I really like a strong wing profile, but in this case we have to remember this is an emerger. It may not have a strong wing yet. Thus, don't be afraid to clip this one a little bit low. I'm going to trim it like that right now to show you. This is really one of the desired lengths for my parachutes. However, because this is the emerger, I'm going to take it down just a little bit more. So just make that trim, gently blow, get those extra fibers out of there. Now I'm going to pull my Z-line for the tail back. Don't be afraid. Don't keep it like pulling it back whenever you trim, because if you let go, it will retract just a hair. So I'm just going to pull it back, let it hang loose. I want it about 3/4, 7/8, somewhere around there of the body length. So once you have that approximate length, make a trim. All right, and now if we take a look at our fly, we do have the finished Sulphur parachute emerger. We have a nice parachute post we can see with that great color. We have this great clear water hackle. We have that trailing shuck, which is the key feature of this. And then we have a sulphur body color that will match the original. So this is the finished look at the fly. Thanks as always for viewing these fly tying tutorials. Thanks to go out to Allen Fly Fishing for the D102 BL barbless hook. It's just a great dry fly hook. And also special thanks go out to Clearwater Hackle. They have just some incredible hackle, and I suggest you guys checking them out. Well, as always, again, thanks for viewing this fly tying tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them directly on this YouTube page, or you can email me at tcamisa@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody.